Are you a bucket of crabs? First, congratulations on your sentence.
Nice.
Second, how do you know you're a bucket of crabs and not a full, genuine human being? Hoi! I'm Serene, and welcome to the Academy. You know, if I know anything about crabs, it's that they're the ultimate form. Scientists have wondered for years why different types of crabs and different, evolution lines are conforming into this one shape, the crab. However, when it comes to mentality, well, let's just not have all these crabs in a container. It feels cruel. And also, like a very apt metaphor. Oh no, it wasn't about crabs. It was never about the crabs, was it? Oops.
Crab is like, if I'm gonna die, we all gonna die.
Beyond crabs, there are also to cut the tall poppy down. The nail that sticks up gets hammered down, and even boven hit my velde utsticken. Just don't put your head above ground level, which obviously I know Dutch very well. These other sayings have more of a conformist vibe, whereas bucket of crabs mentality is a little bit more like we're all going to suffer together, thank you. And this is exactly what I see the black pill community doing. To give a quick rundown on the type of space I'll be talking about when we talk about the black pill community, it's very highly triggering, first of all, for people who have been assaulted of various sorts, but of a particular sort, if you know what I mean. People have been bullied, and people with depression and things related to those. It's not a very healthy mindset, is what I'm gonna say. The space is full of people who are not normal, and I don't mean this in a way to otherize those in this community with both different levels of ability, both mentally and physically, but to say that it's not normal when you dehumanize a whole other group of people just because you're angry. You know, that's not what normal people do. Yeah. Oop. The whole point of the black pill community is to find camaraderie with each other, and one of the ways they do this is by treating women as far below men, which is not a normal human behavior, but one that has become normalized within the community. It is also why I'm referring to the group as black-pilled versus a more general and maybe familiar term, incel, which is involuntary celibate, for those who don't know. The two groups are kind of like, not all rectangles are squares, not all incels are black-pilled, you know what I mean? So, first, we gotta do a little vocab lesson, because if I've learned anything, it's that I hate acronyms, and this is why I'm not in history. Also, this community uses it too much. So, you'll hear things like TRP, TBP, PUA, FWHR, HMV, JBW, JB, KHHV, KV, NGTOW, NW, SMV, 8020, 666, 69%, Alpha, Ascend, Chad, Fake Cell, Female, Void, Gym Cell, Hypergamy, Game, Juggernaut Law, Nihilism, Pink Pill, C-Mac, Soy Boy, Stacy, among many others. And now, I'll define a couple of them for you just because I feel like maybe they're a little more important. TRP, the red pill. It comes from the Matrix. Do you want the red pill and face reality, or stay in delusion and have the blue pill? The choice is yours. They chose to figure out what reality is, and then they went even more extreme and went to the black pill. We have PUAs, or PUAs, which are pickup artists, which have made the rounds on TikTok and other things just for being interesting, is a way to put it kindly. There's other things like HMV, which is used by another group more frequently, but it stands for high value male. So there are different HVM, oh my gosh, different levels of male value, and we want to make sure you know whether you're a high one or a low one. Other things that are just focused on lack of intimacy, MGTOW, which is men going their own way, which you could give them the benefit of the doubt and be like, they're just ascetic men, like in Hinduism or, Buddhism, where instead of, having children, starting a family life, they have set off on the religious journey and will reach nirvana on their own. However, a lot of these MGTOWs are still pretty like, wow, women! So whether or not they go their own way is up to them, but some of them have not. Now, there's things like SMV, which is the market value once again, but of their sexiness. There's a couple numbers like 80-20. 80-20 is a common statistic you'll see, especially in certain forums. On online dating apps or online dating in general, you'll have 80% men, 20% women. And so you have a lot of men who are ignored on the apps, which is kind of like just don't bother with it. Like, you're not even gonna be that hot, probably. So why? And it's also used in another sense where it's, 80% of women will only go for the top 20% of men. Something you could believe in, or you could just not. Another one that's funny is 666, the devil's number. So it stands for 6 feet height, 6-figure salary, and 6-inch pecker. And then there's also 69% of divorces are initiated by women. Wow. And they're very angry about divorces, just a little side note. So, some of the other words are, hypergamy is a thing that you'll hear a lot, and it's mostly just that women want to date up. And I mean, if society's patriarchal and there's more benefits for men than there are for women, just baseline, then yeah. And of course, nihilism isn't just like a black pill ideology, but there's a lot of nihilism in it. So it's a lot about how worthless life is, because there's no point to anything. And that's not a healthy mindset, mind you, just in case if you were wondering. And then you have endings like maxing or cel, which just basically means like an incel, and then it's related to whatever comes in front of it, or like maxing is trying to like make yourself better in a specific way. Like, there's just there's so many like racist and like otherist things within those terms that I'm like, sure, bruh, good for you. You did it. You made up a new word. Nice. Why? I would spend so much time telling you about all these abbreviations if I won't use them myself. Well, I just really wanted to drive home the point that it's very exclusionary. Having all this vocabulary just within this group, it makes it very obvious who is part of the in-group and who is part of the out-group. And so, and I even didn't include like all the words. Like, I thought rope was sexual. And then I realized it was not, and I was like, oh no. Even if you think you know, you don't always know, is what I'm trying to say. Part of the reason why having coded in separate language is so important is, in-group, out-group. Like, are you one of us? Are you part of the team, the squad, the bros, whatever? Or it could also help just try and justify there are different ideologies, because you're like, I have a special vocabulary and I have science that like backs me up, even though some of the conclusions are like not even conclusions that the sociologist or whoever like came up with, or it's just bad science in general. So interesting. When you use scientific words, or you try to make it scientific, then it tries to make you feel valid. And that it's not based on bad science, because like, it's still science, bro. There's no such thing as bad science. There is, and there is such thing as using bias and political means to alter science to fit your specific bias. The sad thing is that incels used to be a support group. Like, it started with a woman who was like, I'm shy when it comes to dating, and I don't really know how to do stuff. Let's all support each other and make sure that we can like have a good time. Maybe meet somebody from the community or maybe just encourage each other to find good, healthy ways to find a relationship. But guess what? This is not what we're seeing. And then even in the 1990s and the 2000s, but especially in like the 2010s and the 2020s, some of the off-branching groups had lighter moderation, and therefore people could say more things that were like misogynistic. So the ideology became one that rejects women's sexual emancipation and seeks to address it through violence. This is something that we'll see in other like male spaces, where if something is considered masculine, if women start entering the sphere, like Comic-Cons, for example, or like anime conventions, where you'll see more assaults happening in those types of areas, because they're like, oh, this is the only place where the boys could be themselves, woo-hoo. And then they see women, and they're like, nah, gotta do something about it, I gotta make sure I'm in control. And then that's when you get bad things happening. In everyday life, some of these black pill men, or even, using the incel community at large, some of the incels would literally try and, from their misogynist ideology, decide that what they would do as retribution is to assault women, to attack them violently in specific ways, and to otherwise make their lives miserable. And then, of course, everyone's favorite, mass attack on the public. And yeah, it's not fun. So it's also hard to ignore the notably racist and even anti-Semitic flavor. There's a lot of neo-Nazis and related nationalist supremacist groups that have joined in the club, and one of the abbreviations that I had mentioned was JBW, and it stands for Just Be White, which I think explains enough. It's just saying that if you are any minority, you should not be. That is your fault. You are not getting laid because you are not white. And that's gross. Why is this the case? The thing is that some of these communities partially got their popularity and definitely spread because of other websites like 4chan, and that's why it's very much like an alt-right type of space. And it's also one of the reasons why soy boy is one of the words that they'll use to degrade men who are like, I support women and I'm not a misogynist. Because these soy boys do not commiserate with the other black pillars, it's considered an act of gendered betrayal, and therefore I must emasculate you as a black pillar. Now, anger is like the key emotion these black pillars are willing to express and feel like they are capable of expressing, even though there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of loneliness, there's a lot of self-hatred, there's a lot of depression, there's a lot of anger. A lot of these guys are spending days, hours at a time, just grieving over their lack of relationship, their lack of intimacy, and by doing this daily, and with other people who can be like, yeah, that sucks, that's terrible, they did you wrong, then anger becomes them. And being sad or frustrated that you aren't in a relationship despite wanting one is something that people experience all across the board. And as the feelings police, I'll allow it. However, it's the rhetoric. The thing is that they don't want a relationship, at least not what it sounds like. It sounds like they just want the other thing. They want to get laid. And that is like the panacea that'll fix everything, but it won't. It doesn't. This isn't even that great, and especially when it's your first time. And that's why incel, which is somebody who is involuntary celibate, or, not having intimate relations despite wanting it, is gender neutral, versus the other term, femcel, which is gendered for women and includes women who are able to have intimate relationships but unable to have to get a long-term relationship. This type of ideology reduces the binary to men want sex, women want relationships. After all, women only want you for your theoretical money, and then they'll divorce you and take everything you have. They would leave you in a heartbeat for someone taller, more muscular, richer, and more attractive. And once you commit to a long-term relationship, even when everything else is perfect, sex drops off. You're gonna be blue ball. Uh-oh. What is a man to do? Hypothetically, if the phrenology, eugenics, racism, sexism, population, and general dehumanization of approximately half of the population, and lack of personal responsibility does not dissuade a potential partner from saying you are somebody to have a relationship with, then is that person okay? Babe, a new kink just dropped, like, And furthermore, there are gurus who will sell face evaluations to these men who are already, a little bit self-conscious, let's say. They put a numerical value onto how ugly their following is. That is not only predatory, but also extremely rude. What the heck? And now you think you're Quasimodo because your eyebrows are a millimeter too far apart. Maybe this is why the community is called a bucket of crabs. If I'm just taking a wild guess here, I think this might be why. But it gets worse. So members who are able to get into a relationship, at the very least have intimate relations with a woman. Nice. And especially those who renounce the black pill community are often considered traitors and are even labeled fake cells, as in they were never a true incel and they never belong. It seems kind of arbitrary to me, if I'm being honest. And what I can't get over is how there is a war mentality, a hunting mentality, and a business or otherwise economic mentality about relationships. Now, this is not just the black-pilled community that talks about relationships this way. It goes much further than that, unfortunately. You'll see authors like Robert Greene. He wrote like the 48 laws or like rules of power and like a couple other books that are in your business section in your local bookstore. And then he also wrote a book about seduction. So it's kind of, I'm like, what do you know? Maybe you know a lot, but also I'm like, really though? And other guys do it too, especially when it comes to puas, the pickup artists, and guys like Andrew Tate, who try and sell you all these ideas and say that if you can do these business, if you can do these war type things, and a lot of the language they use is war type stuff, then you can get a woman, and it feels weird. I could go into it, but I'm not, because this is already going to be long enough. All these types of mentalities are way too adversarial to have a proper relationship. You know what I mean? Like, you're hunting for a woman?
Bruh.
What are you trying to do? Are you trying to eat your partner?
Bruh.
Or mount them on a wall?
Bruh.
Like a trophy?
Bruh.
Weird. And economics? Well, I'm not a commodity, and neither are you. And if you want to be treated like one, I think you're gonna be mad. So maybe don't do that. Just a suggestion. It's almost as if men are valued for their economic value or they're useless. But God forbid they think critically about the science they preach or the social structures they cling so hard to. It's like those things make them useless, unattractive, and totally unfuckable. Marketplace manhood exists, and oh boy, does it make them angry. What do you mean I'm an ATM? I don't want to be that. And yet they still want to have the traditional things of being able to provide for a family, even though the average salary has gone down from about $50,000 to $30,000. It's kind of like dual income homes are a bit more necessary in this current economy. Uh-oh. I'm not one to support marketplace masculinity. It tells men to value themselves only as expendable wage slaves who become neglectful lovers and absentee fathers by virtue of overwork. But why is there such violence against women? And why in the West do we see it mostly coming from white men? Do these mentalities lead to anger? The war mentality, hunting mentality, militant relationships? I think not. But I do think it contributes to violence. But I don't think it contributes to the motive. There is a sense that the anger is at the loss of social structures that have once entitled most men to long-term relationships. Sociologist Michael Kimmel calls a sense of entitlement that can no longer be assumed and that is unlikely to be fulfilled aggrieved entitlement. Within the Black pill community, you can still see men who believe this, and they believe it in the most creepy way possible because they're like, it's okay guys, you can just keep working at your income and keep gaining all that money so that when you're like 40, you can go and you can get like an 18 to 25-year-old. Because also once women are 30, they're like absolutely disgusting and like gross and nobody wants them. And that's disgusting. As somebody who is under 25, no thank you. I don't even want somebody who's like 35 or older in my DM. No thank you very much. And that's being generous to the 35-year-olds. It's all a bit unclear. What do they expect once they're in a relationship? Because obviously they're so afraid of divorce that it's like, do you not want to get married then? Is marriage and having a family the plan, or is it just to get laid? Because I feel like that's very short term and maybe not all that useful, if I'm being honest. Why this focus on virginity, and especially for men, but also just generally in American culture, it's very weird. So I was educated, my sex ed was mostly just abstinence only, but also maybe if you actually have to and you feel like, if you're gonna be crazy, wild, stupid, and gross, you should use a condom. Like, that was my education. In America, it's characterized by encouraging everyone to remain chaste. However, when it comes to enforcing it, it's women and deviants, I'll let you interpret what you will from that, who are policed to uphold chastity, while men are told that they are men when they get with a woman. Even when they get with a man, if they're the one using the phallus, then they're the man, and when they're the one receiving the phallus, they are feminized. Therefore, women and others who are gendered as feminine are made to service the male ego, to uphold masculinity. Without this, they are emasculated and feel robbed of their birthright as men. What in the actual entitlement? However, thinking that Blackpillers are the only ones with this line of thinking is incorrect, unfortunately. Blackpillers are an extreme form of the societal norm that women are expected to be service and care industry denizens from birth. End quote. Society puts this expectation onto women in all relationships. Failures in men's ability to be loved are women's fault for not loving them enough or loving them properly. This is why when some men try to become modern men who express their feelings, some women don't want to hear it. Bell Hooks says, "Many women cannot hear male pain about love because it sounds like an indictment of female failure. Since sexist norms have taught us that loving is our task, whether in our role as mothers or lovers or friends, if men say they are not loved, then we are at fault. We are to blame." Further, birth rates are the fault of women, so some people have taken it upon themselves to theorize how we can get women to be pregnant and continue humanity for the next generation, despite the world average still being at replacement levels, specifically at being 2.4. For example, one enlightening Redditor said this in regards to plummeting birth rates. Behavior psychology is complex, but ultimately there's two factors that motivate animals: the carrot and the stick. To get women to be more interested in having children, the carrot would be things like more generous maternity leave, affordable childcare, the husband changing diapers and doing much more housework, substantial tax credits for families and children, a safer, kinder, and more compassionate society. The stick would be some of the stuff we're currently seeing in America, with women being forced to carry unwanted babies to term. Also stuff like shaming childless women, restricting access to birth control, having enough of a wage gap to make women economically dependent on having a provider. Of course, a society taking the carrot approach sounds like a much nicer place to live.
Bruh.
But there's a bit of an issue. It's men who end up paying an economic price building a society women feel comfortable and pampered enough to want to have enough children to replace the population. And the men putting in the work to build that kind of society aren't necessarily the ones having a bunch of kids. They really said, yo, if I'ma be working my ass off to pay for a good society, I better be having at least 3 kids. Bruh. Women don't owe you babies. Women don't owe you intimacy. Women don't owe you their bodies. Normal men agree with this. Men who love the women in their lives and truly show that they love the women in their lives live life supporting women's bodily autonomy. I mean, isn't it so much sexier when someone wants and is excited to do these things with you, to be intimate with you? There is still so much to say, but for now I'll leave it here, because otherwise my happiness will go away and I'll just be depressed and angry and sad. At the end of the day, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like the video if you liked it, comment if you have some comments about what I've said, and subscribe for more content in the future. Until then, you better hydrate or you will dehydrate. And I will see you in the next one. Bye bye!